All right, this is a lot to all get out at once. So this is part three of sort of my financial history and my career history. Um, since the name of my channel is 35 and retired, and that's a financial thing and a work thing, a couple people have expressed interest that they'd like to kind of hear my story. And so even though this feels a little bit vain to be telling the whole world about a story they probably don't care about, if it's an encouragement to someone, then I'll count it as a win. Okay, so at the end of part two, I just got the job at Volkswagen. So the job I got at Volkswagen was called a technical consultant. So basically, here's how it works. All of the manufacturers have recognized that their cars are getting extremely complex and that dealership technicians will come across problems that are too challenging for them to fix in a timely manner to keep customers happy. And as you may or may not know, the Toyota dealership down the street does not belong to Toyota. It's a franchise. So the business owner of that Toyota dealer is not employed by Toyota Manufacturing. And so it's a type of partnership. And one of the things that Toyota or Volkswagen or anybody else brings to that partnership is technical support on fixing cars that the dealer is basically stumped on. So and I want to tell my story about Volkswagen in a very respectful and honorable way. I don't want my old bosses or colleagues listening to these stories and say like, "Oh, he ratted us out," because I love a lot of people at that company, and I don't want to do them wrong, even though I don't work for them anymore. So I'm going to do my best not to reveal any trade secrets or anything like that, but also be transparent. So Volkswagen had about 25 people who picked up the phone every day and helped dealership technicians fix cars. So my day, basically, I worked on engines and transmissions only. There was another team who worked on electrical body chassis. And basically, what I would do is I would get in the morning and my phone would start ringing, and I would say, "Volkswagen Tech Line, this is James Rojek. May I please have your name and your dealer code?" And something would pop up on my screen, and it would say, technician John Smith is working on a 2005 Jetta, wagon with a 2.5 liter engine. He's got a check engine light on, and he's got PO 101 stored in the engine control module. And so I would help them diagnose and or repair the vehicle. And so they would tell me what they've done so far, and they would tell me what they're stumped with, or they got some readings that they couldn't quite decipher, or they didn't know what to do next. And sometimes it was pretty easy because there was new technicians out there who weren't that good. Sometimes it was really hard because there was shop foremans out there dealing with just insanely difficult problems. But I ended up probably on average taking about 50 phone calls a day. And so as a young mechanic who barely knew anything about anything, I was getting a huge amount of experience. And as a mechanic, sort of going from the customer's symptom to the root cause of what's wrong, that's a big lengthy process. That's really the hard part. Once you know what's wrong, changing that part out is fairly easy. Changing out a mass airflow sensor, anybody can do it, but knowing that the mass airflow sensor is what's at fault, that's the tricky bit. And so I was getting, basically, I did that job for 4.5 years, and I figured I almost got like 20 years of experience diagnosing customer problems. And I was a total sponge. I was reading everything that Volkswagen would put in front of me to read. I was soaking up all of the advice and counsel and tips and hints from my colleagues who were way smarter than me. In particular, one guy by the name of Brian there. I love him like a brother. He mentored me, and he just taught me so much. I'd be nowhere without Brian. And he knows that, I hope, if you were to ever watch this, Brian. Yeah, and so I was a contractor for 3.5 years. So after 1 year, I was given a $10,000 raise. After another year, I was given a $10,000 raise. So I was up to 55,000. And then when I was made direct hire with Volkswagen, I think I made $63,000 a year as like a 22-year-old. And I got married at 21. So that was in the mix. Yeah, and before I was made direct hire, I was promoted from technical consultant to senior technical consultant. So I was one of two guys who handled the extremely difficult powertrain cases, engines and transmissions, and basically cases where the car had been back a bunch of times, cases where the car had been down for weeks and weeks, or cases that people were just totally stumped on. And we also had the responsibility of dispatching our field flying doctors to the cars from the corporate office to help with cars. And during that time, I also got involved in training. I really like to teach. Maybe you noticed that on the YouTube channel, and instruct. And I really like to share. Um, and I think there's a little bit of a difference between teaching and sharing. Teaching is sort of saying like, I know I have the right answer, here it is. Sharing is sort of saying like, I think I figured something out, why don't you try it? And I think that perhaps that teaching desire comes from um, just having had such a bad experience in school. And I don't want to blame teachers for that. If I were to blame anyone, I would sort of blame the overall educational system as a whole, not the teachers individually. In some ways, I would think that teachers are they're given a near impossible task. I mean, it's one teacher and 25 students, and kids develop at different if kids develop different strengths at different ages, but you put all the same kids in all the same classrooms, and then you have 45 minutes to teach each subject, and I just don't know that that's the best system. That's part of the reason I homeschool, but I think that's part of the reason I like to teach. And I have many friends who are teachers. I love teachers, so please don't take any of that in a derogatory way. I just don't know that sitting in a classroom for 6 hours is compatible with everyone's type of learning styles, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't with mine. Anyway, so I started doing training. Not only would I go to training, the same training as the mechanics and the technicians, but I would occasionally teach there. And I just found that to be exhilarating. I was in front of people talking and teaching and sharing, and I was really enthusiastic about it. And so even though I was a technical consultant, I had several extracurricular activities. And I was sort of dabbling in school during this time as well. So basically, when I got hired, I was sure that I would be quitting the following July. I thought I would only work at Volkswagen for 6 or 7 months, and then I was going to go study theology and go be a pastor or something like that. And what changed that trajectory of my life was one Sunday, I was out to eat with a good friend of mine. He had worked in the youth group at my church. He was about 6 years older than me. And he just said, "Hey man, I just got to tell you, and I'm sorry to do this to you because it's not fair, but I just feel like you're not supposed to be going to that school. You are not supposed to go study theology at that school." And he was kind of a mentor, and I tried to take what he said seriously, and rather than just say like, whatever, dude. And so I went home that day, and I told my mom what my friend Mark had said. And she said, "James, I don't know how to tell you this, but your dad and I have been talking about the same thing. We don't think that place is for you." And so I made a very quick decision. I basically said, look, if three of the two, certainly, if the three most sort of mature spiritual mentors in my life are telling me that this particular direction is not the direction for me, I can just go with that and leave it there. Proverbs 15:22 says, "Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed." My faith includes other people who know and love the Lord giving counsel and advice into my life, and that ultimately being from the Lord. So so I kept working at Volkswagen, and at some point, probably about a year in, I just felt like I was missing the mark. Like I just felt like I was falling behind. I felt like all my friends are going off to college, they're getting these degrees, and I'm just working at Volkswagen, and I need to just quit Volkswagen, stop pretending like I'm 40 years old, and go to school. And this first boss of mine, Fred, I'd love to tell you his name because he's such a good guy, but I don't want to do that to him if he doesn't want his name public. Fred, if you're listening, you're a very important person to me, and I love you, and I'm so grateful for your influence in my life. But this boss of mine, Fred, he just encouraged me to stay at Volkswagen and keep working and go to school part-time. Because he said, "James, you're going to leave, you're going to go to school, and then you're going to be trying to get right back in here instead of just staying here and working your way up and moving around and learning." And so I applied to college for a second time, this time to Eastern University. And there was this guy in the building I really liked, Mike W. He had studied technical literature, so basically how to write technical documents. And it was mainly because of my admiration of him, partly because I like to write and teach, that I started studying technical literature. And I got through a couple classes, and it just really wasn't for me. And then I discovered there was a school, Macomb Community College, and they would give you credit. They would give you credit for a college course in the automotive section if you had the ASE certification for that category. So ASE stands for Automotive Service Excellence. And I was an ASE master mechanic. So I had like 12 ASE certifications. And I could basically trade in, I think, 9 or 10 of those for a college, basically for like 9 or 10 classes for an associate's degree. And so basically, without doing any work, I basically had like half of an associate's degree already done if I went to Macomb. So I went to Macomb College, I started taking classes, and I learned a little bit, but most of the classes were teaching me things I already knew and I was already practicing at work. And so it was a little bit discouraging because it just kind of felt like I was working for a piece of paper, which I pretty much was. And in February of 2011, so I had been at Volkswagen for 4 years and a couple months, my boss's boss, the director, asked to speak to me and basically told me that, back up one second. So my boss, Fred, stopped being my boss, and I got a new boss, guy named Keith, who taught me a lot. Fred went off to Germany for a 2 or 3 year assignment. And so after Fred's time in Germany was coming to an end, there was a discussion between the director and his management, Fred being one of those managers, on who would be a suitable replacement for Fred in Germany. And my name came up by the grace of God. And Fred actually is the one who suggested me. And then the 4 other managers, Lars, Ramon, Mike, and Brian, and Keith, who were under this director, they kind of all said like, yeah, I think that could be a suitable choice. And so this director, Mark, spoke to me on a Thursday afternoon and basically threw out this idea of maybe me moving to Germany on an assignment. And I went home. And then on Monday morning, a couple days later, he called me into his office and basically said, we've decided we're going to send you to Germany. And I couldn't believe it. And I said, like, okay, when would I leave? And he said, well, as soon as possible. I don't know. How about May 1st or April 1st? I don't remember. And I was like, well, I'm taking my dad on a backpacking trip to Alaska in the middle of May. And he goes, okay, fine, let's do it after that then. And, sometimes you think in corporate offices, every decision is made with like this committee of super wise people, with their calculators out, and sometimes it's like quite casual. Anyway, yeah, so after 4.5 years of working in Auburn Hills, which at the time was the North American headquarters for Volkswagen and Audi, on June 1st, I got on a plane with my wife and moved to Germany. And in part 4, I'll tell you about that.